Priest Arthur Blythe arrives at Heracles Hospital, looking with admiration of its height. On his way to the doors, he meets a new nurse, Mia Fremont, who greets him. He continues to travel into and then down the halls of Heracles Hospital, on his way to meet a man he knew so little about, yet a man that would change his life and his perspective forever. Nurse Ackerman joins with Arthur, catching him up to speed and laying down the basic information he needs to know. Most importantly, telling him that the man was taken off life support years ago, yet somehow remains alive. She braces him for what he's about to see, and finally, they arrive at room 1280 to finally observe the man. Hey. It was as if Arthur's heart was reminding him to breathe, as he was trying to comprehend what his eyes were showing him. He felt as though he had to guide himself back to reality after witnessing what was the man in room 1280. When he looked again, it was almost a jump scare. The man burnt to a crisp, vaguely resembling a human being only by shape. He looked almost like a charred skeleton, although Arthur couldn't quite figure out whether he really did have skin or not. The man's organs were visible in some parts, and Arthur thought to himself that they all must have been working, as he could outright see the man's heart. There were no facial features whatsoever. Just a hole where the nose must have been, dark pits lacking eyeballs, and a toothless mouth without a lip. How was this man even alive? Although, was it even a man in the first place? He had no name, no family background, no DNA matches. No one claimed this thing as their own. And even if they showed this to his actual family, it would be impossible for them to know who this actually was. Dr. Hannah had told the nurses that there is obvious brain function, surprisingly representing REM sleep patterns, but only of horrific nightmares. The man in room 1280 was nothing more than a figment of what once was. After Arthur decides to finally inspect the body further, Nurse Ackerman tells him more information. Information that after seeing this thing, maybe he would believe without doubt in sight. Ackerman informs him that there are two distinct electromagnetic signals within each lobe of the man's body, which suggests that within this man, there are two souls trying to take control of the single brain. They're at odds, fighting for it with all their might, tormenting each other eternally. After 3 hours of listening to nothing but the monitor's rhythm, Arthur's goal came into fruition. He wanted to discover whether there was any good in the man whatsoever, although that would require communication, and with the state of him, that wasn't happening anytime soon. An attempt could be made, but could Arthur bring himself to do it? In Arthur's mind, he had only one option. He moved only a little closer and spoke to himself. Yes, that's very brave. Although there was a change. Arthur almost immediately noticed a random beep, unlike the monitor's usual rhythm, which he was used to after hearing it for so long. Arthur didn't want to investigate his earlobes to know how, but the man seemed to have responded to his words. "You can hear me?" he asked, shocked. And the man began to move subtly, his index finger moving in patterns. Arthur was confused, but after studying it for a few moments, he realized that the man was not only repeating the same pattern purposefully, but drawing a letter. F. It was an F. The man changed the motion as soon as Arthur guessed the letter, and he quickly grabbed a notepad as the man continued with a different letter. A, he yelled as he wrote it down. F. A. This series of events repeated over and over until eventually the man's fingers returned to its original position. Arthur had managed to get FAZBENTERDISCENTER out of the man. For the first time, progress was made. Arthur focused and spent his time trying multiple combinations of what the letters could spell after the nurses were informed of the news. He eventually had split them up to Faz, Enter, Dis, Center, and after feeling confident with Distribution Center, he continued to try and figure out whatever Faz, Enter meant. He told the nurses he needed a phone book to look up the words, but Nurse Thomas realized what it was and told him Fazbear Entertainment. At that second, Arthur finally got his answer, finishing the puzzle. Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center. This only led to more questions. Why was he spelling this out? What does it mean to him? He started asking questions aloud while waiting for movement from the man, which would signal the correct answer. You've always wanted to go there, the monitors beeped. He quickly continues. Is this a place you want to go? and the monitors quickly reacted. Nurse Ackerman says that he can only go to hell, which immediately causes the monitors to ramp up speed, so fast that the multitude of beeps sounded like a single long one. Arthur understood what the man was communicating, and said, "You want to go to this place before you die." And just when the words left his mouth, everything stopped, and the sounds left. He was right. Arthur almost immediately rushes to Peter Fredericks, the assistant of the hospital's administration, trying to figure out why the patient may want to go to Fazbear's. What would he want from there? Although Arthur is only meant by disappointment, there was nothing there, at least nothing of interest. Arthur thought and quickly came up with his new goal and expressed it to Peter. He questions whether he can take the man in room 1280 to the place he's pleading to go, which may help him understand why. Arthur, however, is only met by the cold words that came out of Peter's mouth. "No one's going to give you permission," to which Arthur sternly replies, "We'll see," as he walks away. Arthur's mission is now set in stone. Bring the man in room 1280 to the Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center. Mia overheard the stories. The stories of a man who's escaping the jaws of death with an iron will to live. These tales were echoed throughout the halls by other nurses. Mia had learnt so much within the very first day of her job. She had overheard the talk from other nurses that Arthur is out of his mind, that he will never get permission. She ignores the comments and goes outside. Seeing Arthur, the two then sit and talk for a few minutes, and have a deep conversation, in which Arthur tells her that some people have closed minds, but it's important she always keeps her mind open. She promises him that she will, and so Arthur bids her farewell. Mia sits behind for a while. So much information in a day, yet so much to learn. The second day of work rolled around for Mia, and today she'd work in the rooms of the 1200s, the same of which the man lays. The day seemed regular and normal, until she noticed a faint shadow. She couldn't necessarily tell what it was, but she had thought that it resembled a person, a kid at least. She would have liked to focus on the shadow, but the words "kill" echoed in the halls. She turns her attention away to listen to what the other nurses were saying, what the new gossip of the day was, although it turns out it wasn't gossip, but talk of action. All the nurses in this section wanted to kill the man who they claim is 100% the pure embodiment of evil, and they want to do it before Arthur gets permission, afraid of what may come after the dust clears, and the job is done. It is now turned into a race for the man's future, allow his fulfillment or his demise. This time though, it wasn't just Mia who heard the chatter, as Mia noticed the shadow in the halls again, and properly this time. A little boy. This little boy, who unknowingly to Mia was named Andrew, had black curly hair and rosy cheeks, an evil grin barely visible from beneath his alligator mask. Andrew was one of the many victims killed by the man himself, before his inevitable demise, now being tormented by an eternal nightmare, forever at Andrew's mercy. The shadow of Andrew winks at Mia, and runs further down the hall, and upon a simple blink, out of sight. Nurse Ackerman had heard that Father Blythe was relentless in his campaign to get the man out and was going to get his permission in no time. So she wastes no time at all, and after another discussion with the other nurses, begins her attempt. She begins to give a dose of morphine to stop the man from breathing, hopefully killing him, and after no avail, a second dose. Once she injects him again, she hears a childlike giggle out of absolutely nowhere and frets away from the man. She quickly runs out and checks the hallway to see if there's anyone out there, only to hear a giggle behind her. Slightly spooked by the sudden noise, she re-enters the room to make sure nothing had changed while she was gone, and nothing had. Her mind must be playing with her, obviously, looking at this corpse, somehow full of life, continuously, while trying to kill him. It must be causing her mind to run wild with ideas. Every single movement would be a million times louder. Every door shut would be slammed. After a few deep breaths in and out, she pulls 11 more doses out and puts them on the bed, ready to get this over with and inject. She then reaches for the third vial, only to hear another giggle. Andrew was right by her side, grinning at her. She almost immediately fell to the floor in fear, but the little boy rushed out of the room. Her mind is no longer her own, but it will be. After a few moments, she quickly reaches for the vial again before the shadow flashes in front of her like a strobe light would, and all the vials fell off the bed, shattering on the floor. The boy. All of the nurses have seen or heard of this boy at this point. When Ackerman tells her about her encounter, Nurse Thomas only sees this as even more of an incentive to finish the man off for good, get all of the evil out of the building, so she now decides to have her attempt. She enters the room with a pillow, trying to suffocate him. No stuttering, no waiting, immediately attempting to banish the evil. Although she realized something unusual was going on. The pillow was beginning to turn red. It was filling with blood coming through the middle of the other side of the pillow. But she held her grip. She was strong and determined, taking this as a sign it was working. She kept holding on for what seemed like forever, as the monitor's steady beat suddenly shifted to the tone of a flat line. It must almost be done, so she keeps it there for longer, even as a new green liquid comes through as well, mixing with the blood. Although as she confusingly looks at the green liquid, Andrew appears and takes the pillow from her grasp. But before she can even respond or come up with a single thought, the blood and green liquid the man was throwing up now covers her entirely. As she attempts to comprehend what she's covered in, the monitors return back to normal. The man has survived death once again, as Nurse Thomas faints. The boy in the alligator mask. Word spread quickly around the entire hospital. If you were to tell someone you saw a child in an alligator mask, they'd simply believe you. Dozens of people had seen him at this point, no one ever being able to actually talk to him though. The police were even called into the hospital, but they were never able to spot him, and no one was missing a child that matches his exact description. Nothing could be done. The discussion swept the hospital on its feet. Mia and Arthur were even talking about it over lunch. She suggests to Arthur that maybe now is the perfect time to go and get permission. Now that the people in admin would be busy documenting all of the sightings of the boy and running around sorting everything and everyone out, maybe nagging them at the apex of their busiest time would get them to just let him do it on impulse, to get him to piss off from the hospital, more so themselves, for good. Arthur agrees, telling her that's not a bad idea, as her lunch break comes to an end. The next day at Heracles, Nurse Colton heads to the man, seeing Andrew already running around in the main hall. She had wondered if maybe it was a ghost, so in spite of this, she decided to place candles around the room, to see if that might keep the spirit at bay, and let her kill the man. It was officially her turn. She was going to simply inject a syringe into him, not filled with drugs of any kind, but just plain air. If it can breathe, it can die of air immobilism, which is when air bubbles enter your veins and those air bubbles can travel to your brain, heart, or lungs and cause a heart attack, stroke, or respiratory failure. She readied herself for the injection, when immediately the candles failed her and burnt out. Although as she looked at the candles, the shadow appeared and forced the syringe from her hand straight into her throat. If it stayed in there for long, she was going to die. She tugged on it and managed to pull it out, barely surviving. She struggled for a moment, regaining her breath, and she looks at the child and tells him that they will find a way to kill the man, only to hear a giggle from the hallway. Nurse Colton leaves the man's room into the hallway only to encounter Mia, who tells Colton she saw him run a different way. Mia's curiosity gets to her and she wants to finally go into the room 1280. Colton wasn't thinking straight, in a panic, and allowed Mia to see him. She saw him for sure. She also saw the problem with him. Not the man, but what's inside. It was like a feeling, and a bad one at that. But was it already too late? Mia rushes to and begs Arthur not to bring the man where he wants to go, and not honor the evil's last request. She tells him this 1,000 times, only to stop herself, realizing that Arthur wasn't changing his mind. The two friends discuss what may happen, and realizing Arthur will fulfill his mission, the uncertainty gets to her, and they exchange a hug on the final day the man's evil looms within Heracles Hospital. On the wheelchair, Arthur rolls the man near the building. "Where do you want to go?" he asks the man, only to get a finger to point at the main entrance of the building. He wants in. So Arthur continued to wheel the man into the building, until they entered what looked to be a storage area for items under the Fazbear Entertainment brand. Arthur thinks to himself for a moment, here we are. As he breathes in deeply, he then looks down at the man who was suddenly barfing up a tar-like substance, beginning to convolute and then eventually explode. Arthur looks to see the remains of the body that was now separated everywhere, knowing he's dead for good. He hears small footsteps coming from the remains, leaving the body and heading towards the shelves. Andrew is now free from tormenting the man, injecting his soul, his rage, his agony, all of the above, into the toys, costumes, and animatronics on the shelves, to begin to possess them. Arthur realized that while the man in room Amontuado had finally moved on, something else hadn't. "Hey, is everything okay?" a voice asked from afar. Arthur told the man that he doesn't think everything is okay, and for the first time in his life, he was sure of it.